Hello again, this is Dr. Martin Sellers, Dean of the School of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, and we're coming back to you again with the program American Culture, Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences.
Support for this program is made possible by Lincoln Memorial University in Harrogate, Tennessee. Further information on academics, campus life, educational programs, admissions, and financial aid, you can contact them at www.lmunet.edu.
Thank you for coming back and listening to this excellent program. We've had a number of segments of American culture, arts, humanities, and social sciences since the early summer, and I'm proud to say, as a political scientist myself, this is one that I'm really proud of and looking forward to. We have several guests with us today that I will ask to have them introduce themselves shortly. Today's program, The Process of Politics and Our American Presidency and American Culture. The Process of Politics. And before we go to the program, the main content of the program, we'd like to say a few things about LMU. Again, it's a beautiful day outside on a beautiful campus. And as I said last time we met by radio, we thought about having this program outside on the bench where we have picnic tables outside, but Gary Daniels said it's impossible to carry this mega board out there to do so. So we're inside thinking about how beautiful it is outside on this excellent campus. And we have here at Lincoln Memorial University, as most of you know, and I hope you know, we have 9 schools here represented on the campus and at our 10 extended sites. And they are the School of Allied Health Sciences, the School of Business, the Carter Moyers School of Education, the School of Mathematics and Sciences, the Kaler School of Nursing, the DeBusk College of Osteopathic Medicine, the Duncan School of Law, and the College of Veterinary Medicine, and of course the School of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. The School of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences has 10 majors, and I like to think of it this way. We are the foundation, the groundwork for all else that goes on in higher education in terms of professional schools and other graduate programs that we have. We have 15, maybe 16 master's degree programs. We now have 9 terminal degrees with a PhD program as well. We are just moving forward in terms of growth and opportunity. And I would like to say, just in terms of providing all of you who are listening opportunity, there are many of you out here in listening to the program who may want to finish a degree that you've been working on or had worked on years ago, or maybe recently come out of the military and have some GI benefits, or maybe not, but looking to find your way and a pathway to success. You might have a 2-year college degree. You might have just a few courses under your belt, or none. We have so many opportunities here at Lincoln Memorial University and also in the School of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences that I would love for you to contact our admissions office. It's very simple. Our web address, www.lmunet.edu. If you go onto that main page, the menu at the top, click on admissions, and just go from there. Someone will be able to advise you. And one of the things I hear quite often, I don't know if I can go to a private university, they're so expensive. That is not the case. We are one of the lowest cost private schools in Tennessee, 4-year institutions with the degree programs we have, and also with financial aid and the scholarships we have. I just would hope you would not be hindered from giving us a call to find your pathway to success because of finances. Our financial aid people, Tammy Tomford and her group, they will find a way for you to find a clear path to success. And there's so many opportunities here. But I could go on, as any of us could, about Lincoln Memorial University and our love of the programs we have and of the opportunities that are here. But I don't want to go on too long because I have 3 or 4 guests who are sitting here and one on the telephone, and these are experts in their field. And if I keep talking, they might run out of the room. So I'm going to ask them, given our our program and its content today to introduce themselves. Today's program, again, is The Process of Politics and Our American Presidency. And I do want to say this before they introduce themselves, is at the very end of the program. This is an hour-long program. I promise if you listen, you will not be bored today. Toward the end of the program, when we have a couple of minutes left, I'm going to ask each of these individuals who they intend to vote for president. Now, I told my class that today, and they said, "Oh, Dr. Sellers, that's illegal, isn't it?" No, I'm too old for it to be illegal. And so I'm going to ask them who they're going to vote for, and they're going to formulate their answer as they're introducing themselves. We have with us today Dr. John Grove, Assistant Professor of Political Science and Director of the Political Science Program. We also have Dr. Michael Toomey, Assistant Dean of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences and Professor of History. Dr. Richard Vogel, Assistant Professor of Media Communications and Director of Media Communications Program. And on the phone we have Dr. Harry Toder, Assistant Professor of Criminal Justice. And I'll just go around the table here, Dr. Vogel, if you want to self-introduce, tell us a little bit about where you're from, a little bit of background. We would appreciate your input.
Good afternoon. Originally from New York and been living here now for 4 years, watching the politics of this area. Been involved as a producer, director, worked in news, worked at a hyper-local news agency, my most recent, where you find out that really small towns, small areas have great access to information they never had before, and to get local representation. So, my background is in news and also in writing, directing corporate videos and commercials and public service announcements. I teach a number of courses here, including media law, news writing, history of the media, and a number of production courses.
Excellent. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dr. John Grove. As Dr. Sellers mentioned, I'm the Assistant Professor of Political Science at LMU, and I'm the Program Director of Political Science. I am originally from Virginia, and then I've kind of traveled all around the country in graduate school and a number of academic jobs. I particularly like to study the history of political ideas, but I also really love teaching American politics and the processes of American elections as well.
Thank you, Dr. Grove.
Hi, I'm Mike Toomey. I'm Assistant Dean for the School of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences and Professor of History here at LMU. Been here, this is my 9th year. I'm from Tennessee, born in Memphis, raised in Chattanooga, and I've lived in the Knoxville area since 1982. I went to graduate school to study American history in the big picture, but one of my fields was the early national period, and that's when I kind of got interested in American politics, and more particularly in the Constitution.
Wonderful. And Dr. Toder, are you still there?
Yes, sir. Well, I'm Harry Toder, and most recently, I just came here this year, and most recently I came from Central Kentucky. I have a long background of teaching both sociology and criminal justice. And I think what explains my interest in politics, I did not used to be terribly interested in politics. However, as I feel that I've grown as a professor, it seems as if all of the issues that I address in my classes ultimately come down to political decisions. So therefore, if I want to continue in the profession that I'm in, I must have a knowledge of politics. And so over the course of the years, I have developed such an interest.
Thank you, Dr. Toder. As we all see here, we have some excellent, I'll call them all experts, but really in talking to these gentlemen, and I know them all very well from associating with them in the School of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, they all have an interest in politics and in the political system, and I'm just glad as all get out to be able to have them on the show and talk about how politics is happening today. Before we go into politics per se and some of how it operates and how the processes go, And just to let you all know, all of you who are listening, we're going to be talking somewhat about the primary system, the electoral college, the requirements for presidency, and so on. But before we go there, Dr. Grove, we have a new political science major on campus. It's only been here 2 years, whereas these other programs, criminal justice and MediaComm, which used to be broadcast communication, history, of course, English, they've been around for a long time. Can you tell us a little bit about the political science program, what it includes, what a student might expect if he or she joined up in that program?
Sure. First off, it's certainly great that LMU, a school named after Abraham Lincoln, finally has a political science major. Political science is a great and a very diverse field. A lot of people hear the word politics and they think of one thing, elections, ads, right, campaigns, politicians. But really, political science covers a lot of different diverse subfields, and students here at LMU in both the political science major and the political science minor get a great taste of that diversity. Like most political science programs, our program contains courses in American politics, which studies the kind of thing we're talking about today, right, the processes of campaigns and elections, of the various powers and authorities of the different branches of government at both the federal level and the state level. But it also includes things like world politics, which, international relations, the way countries interact with one another, and comparative politics, which compares different political systems across the world. And it also includes the political ideas and political philosophy, which studies the history of how people have conceived of politics, what politics is, and why we even need government to begin with. And then it also includes things like public administration, which prepares students for more specific careers in public agencies, and they can then go on and get a degree like a Master of Public Administration degree, which LMU also offers.
Thank you, Dr. Grove. And a question I get quite a bit, that we all probably get quite a bit, is does someone have to be a political science person in order to run for office? Actually, what I really get often is, does somebody have to be a lawyer to run for office and take office, let's say, in the state legislature? How do you respond to that when students ask something like that?
Well, sure. There's no certainly no specific requirements about what your background needs to be. Need only look at our presidential candidate, right, to see that there's no specific background, right, or experience that is required to run for office. Certainly, lawyers tend to predominate. People who have a law background, and in the legislatures, also people who have business backgrounds tend to predominate. But there are farmers, there are small business people. There are even a couple academics, if you can believe that. There are a couple academics in Congress. So you can have a wide variety. Certainly law is the way that most people get to Congress or the presidency, but certainly not everybody.
Well, here's our test question. Who is the only PhD president?
Woodrow Wilson.
From New Jersey.
Give me something that's hard.
Oh, Lord. Okay, I'm going to think
in
of
history, I might add, too.
And history, yeah, that's Dr. Toomey, very good. Dr. Toder, I know you're there. You get a lot of students come to your criminal. We have an excellent criminal justice program. It's been on campus for about 10 years now, and we have a master's program. Do you get students in your classes who are interested in politics, and what kinds of interests do they have?
Do you mean Dr. Toder, or you said Dr. Toomey, I thought?
Dr. Toder, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, to be honest with you, Dr. Sellers, I find that a lot of students either do not have an interest in politics, so my job is to try to cultivate that, but more commonly, to give you a very honest answer, they're even averse to it. They find it repulsive, actually, and to me that would be quite understandable in the light of the current campaign. This has been most distasteful. But however, I would challenge people in these terms. How do you get anything done other than through the political process? Mm-hmm. So we have the system that we have, and I think I'll let Dr. Grove or anybody else comment on this, but I feel that the citizens get the leaders and the type of campaign that they ask for. Now, I think I was talking to Dr. Grove about this, I believe, but if you look at the amount of attention in this current campaign that's actually being given to the issues, well, it's pretty minuscule, and instead it's reverted to personal attacks of one sort or another.
Yeah, Dr. Let me hold you there just for a moment. We're going to come back. It's a very interesting conversation, and I want to get Dr. Vogel's impression when we come back. But we're going to take a short break. Thank you all for listening.
On Wednesday evenings, you can tune your radio to WLMU and hear the best blues in the tri-state area with your host, Gary Daniels. He'll be playing the best blues artists of today and the best blues artists of yesteryear. Everything from Robert Johnson, Buddy Guy, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Muddy Waters, and many more. It's Wednesday Evening Blues from 9 to 11, right here on 91.3 WLMU.
Hello, here we are again with our program, American Culture, Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. And today we're focusing on the process of politics and our American presidency as it impacts on our American culture. We have some wonderful guests today. Dr. John Grove, Assistant Professor of Political Science and Director of the Political Science Program. Dr. Michael Toomey, Assistant Dean of Arts, Humanities, Social Sciences, and Professor of History. Dr. Richard Vogel, Assistant Professor of Media Communications and Director of the Media Communications Program. And on the phone, we have a call-in by Dr. Harry Toder, Assistant Professor of Criminal Justice. And we've been talking about students and how in our classes and programs might be grasping politics and political science these days. And I was going to ask Dr. Vogel for his impressions of the student body and what they might be hearing or how they're hearing it.
One thing, a couple of things. I'm a fan of politics. I'm advisor to the College Democrats and also have done a bunch of speech writing for various candidates. So my students also feel that politics is this horrible place they don't want to walk into. I remind them that, well, what they see on CNN and other news networks, it is ugly at times. Can't argue that. But because of politics, we have Civil Rights Act, the Clean Air Act, and many things that many would argue have helped our country. Politics is a process that accomplishes a lot of good, but unfortunately the other side of it's the ugly side that our students are being surrounded by quite often.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, as we all do. It's a decision-making process for an entire nation to focus on policy, and as well our states and local governments as well. I wanted to ask this, Dr. Toomey, our eminent historian. I'll put the pressure on you a little bit here. Constitution, the United States Constitution, what does it say primarily about electing a president? What are the requirements in that regard?
Okay. Article 2 deals with the executive branch of government. The very fact that they even had an executive branch of government was a bit of a surprise. These guys were not at all comfortable with executive power, and in 1787, when they wrote this, that was a new deal. Having resolved to have a president or an executive, the next question was, how do you elect them in such a way as to be fair? And they wrestled with that. That was one of the major issues at the convention. How do we elect a president? What bothered them was they weren't at all convinced that the people really had the necessary knowledge to do a good job of electing a president. They were distinctly concerned that some demagogue might come along and say all the right things, or I guess you could say the wrong things, and persuade the people to support that person, and that person may or may not have the credentials or the background or the training. And so they put in place an electoral college. People would actually elect electors, and those people would actually have the responsibility of electing the president. And that gives the people an indirect voice, and they believe that would allow electors, who are responsible people, in the state, and those electors would be selected by the state legislatures, who themselves were educated, informed people. And they expected this to work and provide a sort of a buffer between the emotions of the people and the calm and reflected decision as to who should be president.
Mm-hmm. And as I recall, one of the requirements for presidents, being a president of the United States, is being a naturally born citizen. And this came up when now President Barack Obama ran for president. There was a whole issue about whether he was born in the United States. That got resolved, but more recently, Ted Cruz, as I recall in the primary, there was some question about whether being a Canadian-born person could be president. Do you recall that, Dr. Vogel?
I recall there was an attempt to make it an issue, and I never saw that it was resolved, but I'm pretty sure Ted Cruz was qualified to be president.
I'm sure he said so several times.
And all the surrogates did too.
But constitutionally, are there political parties that are, we have these political parties, and a lot of folks like me, I go to work every day, I come back and forth, listen to the radio, and I just assumed in my workaday world, family life and so on, that we have two political parties. They've always been around. It's probably in the Constitution for all I know. Where do political parties come from? What does the Constitution say about that? Anybody?
Well, the Constitution says nothing about political parties because they didn't envision that being an issue. There is absolutely no provision in the Constitution for any political partisan affiliation at all. And indeed, as George Washington was about to retire after his second term and saw that looming on the horizon, he distinctly warned America to be very, very concerned about the possibility of partisan politics.
Then Dr. Grove, where do they come from? How is it we have these two parties? And why in the world do we only have two?
Sure. Well, I would note, just also to bring this back to the question of the Electoral College as well, a very plausible case can be made that a lot of the folks at the Constitutional Convention, because they didn't foresee us having a two-party system, believed that ultimately the president would be generally selected by the House of Representatives, because they believed that generally most candidates would not receive, or in most elections, no candidate would receive a majority of the electoral vote. So because they thought, well, we would have 5 or 6 plausible candidates, the Electoral College would narrow down the selection process, and then the House of Representatives could choose from the top candidates. But why two? Well, political scientists usually answer that question with a fairly simple observation. That is, all of our elections center on majority or plurality rule, which means winner take all. So we have majority rule of the Electoral College. If you win a majority, you become president. In our House and Senate elections, the top vote getter gets the seat. Second place doesn't get you anything. So what that means, as a practical matter, is that if you really want to impact American politics, you have to have a very legitimate chance of actually winning everything. Third place, fourth place doesn't get you anything, right? So when you have that type of situation, there's a great tendency for smaller parties to combine into bigger ones because they have a better chance of finishing first. And there's a tendency for people not to vote for any kind of parties that aren't in legitimate contention to win. So that makes it very, very difficult for a third party, or certainly any more than a third party, to be competitive and to get votes.
You know, Dr. Grove, I was sitting here trying to think of another test question for you, and the one I came up with, I have a question, but I can't remember the answer. Isn't that ridiculous? And here's the question, and that is, there are 2 states, I'm sure, that have proportional...
Nebraska and Maine.
Oh, Nebraska. Well, there you are. I'm so glad I'm not in your class. Oh, my gosh. Thank you for that. You're very bright, and I appreciate all you do. But I do want to ask this. We have these political parties, and Dr. Toomey, I think you could probably help us with this. They have arisen. Have we only had Democrats and Republicans? Is that how it works, or what happened to the beginning?
We started off with under Washington's 2 administrations, there was technically no parties at all, because after all, George Washington is not, who's going to run against him? As soon as he's not running, as soon as he's just announced his intention to retire, then we immediately saw the beginning of political parties emerging from the fact that Alexander Hamilton, his Secretary of the Treasury, had envisioned such a strong, active federal government, and there were many people at the time who were just appalled at that concept. And there's your beginning of the two basic divisions. What is the role of federal government? And two parties emerged to answer that question. The Federalists, of course, were the dominant party, and they were challenged by the Democrat Republicans, sometimes called the Jeffersonians, and sometimes just simply called the Republicans. Eventually, they were going to win out in 1800, and what Jefferson refers to as the Revolution of 1800, a peaceful transfer of power from one political party to another, something we still do to this very day, to the amazement of many people worldwide. That party endured until the Federalists faded away after the War of 1812, and for a long time they were about the only party until the rise of Andrew Jackson and a lot of opposition to his seemingly heavy-handed approach to politics brought on the Whigs in the mid-1820s, and they endured until 1852 or thereabouts. The Whig Party had a lot of influence. Abraham Lincoln was a Whig, but they refused to take a strong position on slavery. They faded away and were replaced eventually by the Republican Party, basically the two-party system we have with us today. There have been a lot of other third parties that came along and made had a bit of success, got a lot of people elected to Congress, but never much success at the presidential level. Theodore Roosevelt and the Progressive Party in 1912 did pretty well, but not nearly well enough to win.
Very good. I appreciate that expression of how parties operated, how they've come about. Some of us do recognize, if we're aware of how the political system works, we do have other parties in our system. We have more than Democrats and Republicans, and we tend to forget the Libertarians and the Socialist Party and the Green Party, Green's Peace Party, and so on. Dr. Grove, Dr. Vogel, Dr. Toder, what do parties do today to help us in our political system? What's their role in today's world?
Well, generally speaking, the kind of positive role that is usually assigned to parties is often they're seen as a kind of simplification mechanism for voters. That just like Dr. Toomey was noting that the folks in the Constitutional Convention didn't believe that the kind of average citizen had the knowledge to select presidents. They didn't know the issues all that well. They didn't know the candidates all that well. Generally speaking, political science research tends to back that up, that the average citizen isn't extremely well informed about issues and candidates and where people stand. So oftentimes parties are kind of seen as kind of simplification mechanisms where citizens are able to kind of tell which party they generally align their views with, and therefore they can kind of identify with that party and tend to support that party, which can be a good thing in that it gives voters a kind of compass by which they can tell who are the politicians that are supporting their views and who aren't. But of course, it's also a kind of negative thing as well, because oftentimes people tend to simply look at the R or the D next to somebody's name and not really think through whether this person is acting in their interests, whether this person is really in line with their views or not.
We're going to take a short break. Dr. Vogel, when we come back, though, I'd like to get your opinion on if parties are really getting their message across and what that kind of messaging is. Very interesting. And we'll ask Dr. Toder to chime in as well. American Culture, Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. We'll be right back.
All right. I know this isn't any fun to talk about, but we should. So, who's going to do what? Flashlights?
Nowhere to be found.
Where to be found? Batteries?
Dead.
Great. Emergency supply kits?
Not packed.
No. What about blankets?
We have an old towel.
Good enough. Cell phones?
May not work.
Emergency water?
Not a drop.
And what about food?
Nope.
Perfect. We all know where we're meeting if we're separated, yeah?
The library. Aunt Joan's house.
The bus stop.
Great. And I'll be waiting here wondering where you all are. Sounds like we don't have a plan. Who's up for mini golf?
Winging it is not an emergency plan. Make sure your kids know what to do during an emergency. Who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information. A public service announcement brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Back again with the American Culture, Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences program here at streaming worldwide at 91.3 thegap.com, Harrogate, Tennessee, 91.3 FM. And we're proud to come to you from Lincoln Memorial University here in Harrogate, Tennessee, the beautiful campus of Lincoln Memorial. Have some wonderful guests on the program today. The program, as you know, if you've been listening, the process of politics and our American presidency in our American culture. Wonderful guest, Dr. John Grove, Assistant Professor of Political Science and Director of Political Science Program, Dr. Michael Toomey, Assistant Dean of Arts, Humanities, Social Sciences, Dr. Rick Vogel, Assistant Professor of Media Communications, and Dr. Harry Toder, Assistant Professor of Criminal Justice. And we left off with a discussion about political parties and their role, and I was hoping that Dr. Vogel could say a few things about whether you think the parties are messaging, how are they messaging to the public, and is the messaging really getting across, or is it something that's changed over the years? How would you characterize that?
I would contend there is a change in surrogacy. It used to be the messages came from centralized locations. The Democrats, Republicans, or if there was a third party, would have a message. They'd be able to disseminate it through the legacy media. The legacy media had a very defined role: inform, persuade, entertain, and a chance for the audience to use them to find out what's going on. Now the parties are using the variety of media available to them, including social media, which is used to mobilize. It's used to label and used as never before to essentially publish whatever we want about whoever we want without any fact-checking. There's a dependency on a population who maybe identifies as a Democrat, identifies as a Republican, and having identified, that's all I need to know, is I qualify as one of those. Mm-hmm. And they're getting information, as we tend to do. We get communication reinforcing everything we've already thought, everything we already believe. Mm-hmm. And there's what legacy, traditional media might do, it's fact-checking. Mm-hmm. But now with all the other media, essentially the parties could put out any content. Their surrogates, which may have no direct connection to the party, could put out whatever content they want without fear of being contradicted. Mm-hmm. So I think the parties help mobilize, help self-identify, but they've been taken over by many surrogates at many levels. They get to spread information, misinformation, disinformation. It's really changed.
Dr. Toder, I know you're still on the line.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on the role of political parties today? Are they helpful, and if they are, in what way? Are they diabolical in some way? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I believe that the two major parties are succeeding getting their message out. We may not like the message, but I like to envision it, rather than Democrats and Republicans, why not talk about the Liberal Party in the United States, i.e. the Democrats, and the Conservative Party, i.e. the Republicans? I do believe that both sides are getting their message out. For example, during one of the two earlier debates, Donald Trump talks about lowering taxes in order to stimulate the economy. That's a conventional Republican approach, whereas Hillary Clinton is talking about taxing the rich to a greater extent. In other words, the redistributive role of the tax system. So I believe, in essence, that the two parties are getting their message out. However, we may not like the way they are delivering that message.
Right, it's understandable. Which brings me, when I think about messaging, it brings me to the issue of social media. You know, I've seen, we've all heard about and seen, unless we're awake at 3 o'clock in the morning. I haven't seen them myself at 3 o'clock in the morning, but there's an awful lot of social media going back and forth, generally speaking. And I know, Dr. Vogel, you probably want to say, is that a positive trend for us, or is it not?
What I always tell them in class is that the internet and social media is a wonderful thing, and that everybody gets to communicate what's on their mind. And it's also a terrible place where everybody could communicate whatever's on their mind.
Right.
And that's where it takes the consumer to actually do the fact-checking when they read stuff. And I read something yesterday that spread by, I don't know actually who, that President Obama had signed an executive order to ban the Pledge of Allegiance. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people were appalled at this. And of course, it never happened.
Right.
But through social media, it gained credibility because it's in the media, therefore it must be true. So I think the social media is both a double-edged sword. It's the best and it's the worst of what we have to offer.
You know, that the idea that Donald Trump expressed about he's awake at 3 o'clock in the morning and Hillary isn't, so he's ready to use the military at a moment's notice. You know, that locks into, am I right? It locks into people's minds, and they start to formulate either negative or positive disposition or predisposition toward one candidate or the other. And I just wonder if that isn't, it doesn't seem to me to be a positive for helping us choose in a more unbiased way one candidate or another.
It gives us visuals instead of facts. It tells us, imagine somebody laying there at the end of their couch waiting for the phone to ring instead of finding out the policies both would act on. So I think, but it is better, I think, if you're perhaps a candidate, if you could give the audience a visual, because that's something you carry with you. They may not be able to recite a fact or studies or policies, but they can recite a visual.
Yeah, we live in a soundbite age, and certainly we all carry bunches of them with us and hope that they don't affect us in some way that we wish they wouldn't. Now I want to go back a little bit, and something we were talking about earlier, that is the Electoral College. I'm still unsure that we have put this on the table the way it should be. And this is going to bring me to the question about red and blue states, but the Electoral College, when I have students ask me this, they say, what good is it? Why is it there? How has it evolved? And what role does it play? And what do you mean, Dr. Sellers, that I'm not voting for president? Yes, I am. It has his name in the voting booth. I vote on the president. Well, you don't vote on the president. How has this evolved over time, and what role does it play today?
Sure. Well, as Dr. Toomey had said earlier, the Electoral College was initially created as a way to get what we would typically call them political elites to make the decision on who ought to be president, that the people would be selecting individuals who would then decide who ought to be president. That was written in a less democratic age, right, than we live today. And as American society became more democratic and became more insistent on majority rule, more insistent that the people ought to have a more immediate role in our elections, a couple evolutions quickly took place in the Electoral College that in many ways kind of transformed it completely. The first thing that started happening was that the electors that were chosen not based on who they were, but based on who they promised to vote for. So this was called pledged electors. So electors would promise, I'm going to vote for John Quincy Adams, or I'm going to vote for Andrew Jackson. So people would vote for them based on who they promised then to vote for president. So that really kind of transformed the Electoral College from this kind of mediating institution, right, in between the will of the people and the presidency, into one where the people really, for all intents and purposes, were voting for president, but just through the action of electors. And then that made possible a second major evolution, which is the winner-take-all approach that states take to choosing their electors. Once electors began to pledge themselves to certain candidates, states who, under the Constitution, states are free to select their electors in any way they see fit. So states began to decide that they would hold a statewide vote, and the people would vote for who they wanted to be president, and then the state would assign electors based on who they pledged to be president. So, for instance, Tennessee votes for Mitt Romney. Then Tennessee appoints all the electors for who are pledged to vote for Mitt Romney. So that means that whoever wins the statewide vote wins all of the electors for that vote. As we touched on briefly, there are 2 states who have slight variations on that and can split their electoral votes, but 48 out of our 50 states today select their electors on a winner-take-all basis. So that really kind of defines the way the Electoral College works today.
So what would happen, this is not a test question, this is just a general question, what would happen if we had a third candidate and we did not have a majority of electors? What would happen in that case?
Sure. If the Constitution is very clear on this, if nobody wins a majority in the Electoral College, then the House of Representatives chooses the president from the top 3 vote getters in the Electoral College. So if you have 269 to 267 to 2, the House of Representatives could select from all 3 of those candidates who should be president. And importantly, the House of Representatives votes by state delegation, which means every state would have an equal say. California would have an equal state, or have an equal say with North Dakota. So based on equal vote for each state, the House of Representatives would select the president.
So if we have 3 candidates whose names go to the House, someone from a number who has support from a number of very small states with small population could, in effect, become president with a very small popular vote.
In theory, yes. There would certainly be strong pressure on the House of Representatives not to select somebody who received a very small number of votes, but that pressure ultimately doesn't have any legal binding. The House would be free to select anybody from that top 3, definitely.
Very good. Before we take a break, I just want to be sure of this. I'm a voter. I am not a political scientist. I don't know a lot about politics. I walk into the voting booth, and I look, there's 2 names, Clinton and Trump, and I press a button. I can't be absolutely sure that who I press the button for will become president, even if there's a popular vote in favor of that person. Am I right?
Sure. The popular vote, so the person who wins the most actual individual votes, right, is not guaranteed to be president. Right, in 2000, for instance, Al Gore won the popular vote. He won more citizens' votes, but the Electoral College voted for George W. Bush because George W. Bush won a combination of enough states with enough electoral votes that he won the majority of the Electoral College. So it's certainly possible that the winner of the popular vote would not become president, and it has happened before.
So is that cheating the system somehow, or is that legal? Is that constitutional?
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely constitutional. In fact, I think the people who structured the Electoral College thought it would happen all the time. There was no assumption that the person who won the most votes would become president. Definitely
fascinating. This is a great talk we're having about politics in our program, American Culture, Arts, Humanities, Social Sciences. We're going to take a short break and be right back with you. Thank you.
There's something happening here. But what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Hello again, this is Dr. Martin Sellers, Dean of the School of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, coming back to you with a fascinating program on our political system, political process, here on our program, American Culture, Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. And we've been talking a good deal about the Electoral College and how one presidential candidate would accrue enough votes from that college to become president, and that, in fact, you and I, when we vote, we don't really vote on the president. We vote on the Electoral College. I wanted to move forward a little bit to today's world, where when we watch one of the networks during a presidential election evening of the election, and we see red and blue states on maps, and persons who are on those network programs telling us the red states are turning blue and the blue states turning red, and so on. We have Dr. Toder on the line. I want to ask Dr. Toder, what is your view of these red and blue states? What significance does that carry for our political process?
Well, the red states are considered the Republican states. The blue states are considered Democratic states. So, actually, in my view, what the election comes down to is there are those states that are in between that can go in either direction, and they call those the battleground states. And I can't remember, maybe one of the other panelists can help me out on this, but I know that the state of Ohio, that is always considered one of the battleground states, and I believe it has gone with the winner of the election maybe approximately the last 10 presidential elections. So that can be either a red or a blue state. And so I think that the idea is to capture the states that are in between, and then in listening to the analysis on television, it seems like a great deal of focus is put on those approximately 10 to 15% undecided voters, and then there's those maybe 10 to 15% undecided states. But the rest of the states, I want to qualify this, are predictably Republican or Democrat. However, what's going to be very interesting to me in this election is how many states may flip. And the best example that I have in mind is the state of Arizona, which has gone Republican for several elections. But I was just reading today that Hillary Clinton is 5 points ahead in the poll in Arizona. So those states that might flip from a red state to a blue state. I don't see very many states flipping from blue to red in this election. Maybe some of the other panelists might disagree with me on that point.
Yeah, let me open that up to these three gentlemen sitting up here. What are your thoughts on red to blue or blue to red states, and the significance of parties as they move into those states to try to move the population one direction or another? What are your thoughts on that?
To me, from a media sense, it means some states get inordinate amounts of attention as to their needs, their wants, and what anybody says there. We're going to hear a lot about Florida and Ohio. I'm hearing a lot about North Carolina. And I think, and somebody will correct me, I think no Republicans won the presidency without Ohio. Dr. Toder mentioned that being a significant state. But I think George W. Bush is grateful to the state of Florida.
Yes.
So I think it focuses our attention on a few states, and I think it kind of leaves out the majority of the country with their concerns, their issues that don't get as much attention.
And of course, you're referring to the Bush-Gore election of 2000, where George
that I
Bush
stayed up
won
very late on TV.
563 votes, I think it was. And if anybody says that a vote doesn't count, they have to go back and look at that historically. Had great impact. Dr. Grove, any comments on that?
Sure, I would connect this to what we were talking about a little bit ago. The fact that we have these red and blue states and swing states is a direct result of what I mentioned a few minutes ago in winner-take-all proposal. They're the winner-take-all policies of states. It's the fact that all you have to do is win one more vote than the other candidate, and you win all of those electoral votes. That's what makes states red and blue. If we didn't have that, and if you got 55% of the electors, if you won 55% of the vote, if we had proportional selection method, basically every state would be a kind of shade of purple, right? It would just be how shaded are you. So it is a kind of a direct result of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's bring this discussion up to more current day issues, and in a general sense, let me ask all of you your opinion on this. Republicans are typically thought to be supportive of, if you will, small national government, more traditionalistic and conservative, and we'll talk about some of these issues where the Democrats tend to be attempting to overcome a reputation of spending and big government. Do these kinds of concepts play a role in how a presidential campaign is carried out? And if these things and first of all, do you all think this is true? I mean, do you think these ways of looking at parties are exaggerated in some way, or are these factual? What are your thoughts?
I think the media attention is not as much on the policies and as much as polls. I think the media takes the easy way out, the path. So there's just constant updating on polls, on the latest utterance that may have given offense. So I think while it should focus on the different platforms of the parties, I don't think the media gives it much attention at all. They never bring experts in on CNN or the other cable news networks to talk about the effects of the policies of the two parties or three or four parties, or maybe what value the Green or Libertarian Party. It is always who said what, who's winning in the polls, who's gaining traction. There's a total lack of substance. So I think the focus of the population is off the content of the platforms and on who said what. It's a simplifying and sad way to decide a president. Well,
let me ask this. I know, Dr. Toomey, you probably want to chime in, but I read recently that a vast majority of Americans, and I'm thinking of adult Americans who work, male and female, doesn't matter race and all that, but just adult Americans who work, a vast majority, and I think the way it was couched was, don't have time to read anything about any news coverage of substance about elections. So when we say that we need to have more information about policy, would that even be meaningful if no one, I don't want to say no one, but if the vast majority of us don't have time to look at substantial news? What are your thoughts?
The amount of time we spend on the media for the average population has not gone down. It's what we're watching has evolved and changed. Where we go for media content is no longer 90% going to the three networks. It's only about 30% going to the major networks. Now the rest of the population's dispersed among its cable networks and Netflix and Hulu elsewhere. So to say we don't have the time, research doesn't back that up too much. What we choose, where we choose to spend our time is changing.
Dr. Toomey, do you have something to say on that? Or, well, let me ask it this way. Unfortunately or fortunately, we have all four people who are speaking today are men, including me. That's five. We don't have a female sitting here, primarily because we don't have a female who directs one of these programs. But and I say that because if you were to go home tonight and ask your wife, where did you get the information you have so far for voting on the president, one of these candidates? Where would she say she got her information?
I forced her to listen to me a lot.
That's unfortunate. No, I'm teasing. Dr. Grove, what would your wife say?
Well, I believe she's listening live.
Can she call in? Maybe we get her on the phone.
Well, I think we a lot of it is discussion, right, at home, that within families, that people have a lot of they talk about politics, which sometimes can lead to, right, the kind of echo chamber effect that Dr. Vogel was talking about earlier, that you hear a lot of what you want to hear. So I don't know. I think she would probably say me also, because I talk about it a lot.
Dr. Toomey, what would Lydia say?
Well, let me just put it this way. I think if this election has shown us anything, it is that women are keenly interested in the outcome of this election. And they're paying attention, and they always have for 100 years or more, ever since 1920, and even before. They've been eager to get the right to vote, eager to be participants, and eager to take steps that would change and improve their status. And I think they are keenly aware, very well informed, and eager to make a difference.
Okay, then I didn't get much mileage out of that answer, but let me.
Well, the fact women are going to women are strongly Democrat. Men, if men were the only voters, Donald Trump would win this election. I think most studies show. So a lot of people do get their information from hearsay out in public, but as Dr. Toomey said, the women are very informed. Obviously, a lot of my most active students are female, and so they're a big part of this election, obviously.
We're getting down to the short rows in terms of time. Let me ask a couple of other things that the listeners may be interested in. Been a lot of discussion about how legal our actors in our political system. Some have been claimed. It's been claimed to have run roughshod over the law. Should political actors or leaders be held to the same punishment as others who are not in politics if they break the law or are found to have broken the law? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, of course they should. Nobody's above the law at any level, and that's a given in our society. And I think in both cases, both of the candidates who have had charges of one form or another leveled against them have been investigated thoroughly and or will be investigated. I should point out, I guess, but there's no exception for anybody in this country as far as the law is concerned.
I'm glad you say that, because we have had presidents who have been impeached because of wrongdoing. No one. You're exactly right.
Let me just point out that being impeached is not the same as a conviction. Being impeached just simply means put on trial, and in both cases they were found not guilty.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, which is something I always say to my students because they do mix those two things up. I want to ask you this quickly. A lot of issues on the table in this presidential election. I looked at Pew Research surveys today. Here are the top 5 issues that Pew surveys have found to be on the minds of Americans today, or this week, let's say. The economy, terrorism, foreign policy, health care, gun policies. Let me restate them. Economy, terrorism, foreign policy, health care, gun policies. Now, I'm going to make this statement. Tell me what your thoughts are. All of those seem to be what we used to say in my political classes, male-oriented, except for healthcare, male-oriented issues. Healthcare is kind of a female-oriented issue. That's how it used to be stated. What if those are the main issues? Will those issues drive the election toward Trump or toward Clinton? What are your thoughts?
Well, there's a lot of studies that continue to measure how men and women differ in what issues they find to be important. But certainly there's a lot of kind of cross-cutting in that as well. That things like the economy, foreign policy, I think, especially to the extent that they really hit home domestically, when foreign policy, for instance, hits home domestically within this country, that it might not really be much of a male-female issue in that somebody's economic policies, to the extent that people are researching economic policies, it might not really be much of a divide that male and female issues. It's more of a matter of usually those polls also ask what party do you trust more on this issue, right? Foreign policy, economy, and each party typically has a historic advantage in each one of those issues. So I think it might be more of a kind of partisan issues, but I would suggest that if those issues are the most important ones, most of those I think would probably be more favorable to Hillary Clinton.
Okay, well, we're about to run out of time, and I did promise that I was going to ask you all. I won't be able to get to you, Dr. Toder, but thank you for being on the program. Thank you, Dr. John Grove, Dr. Michael Toomey, Dr. Richard Vogel. But I want to ask you, Dr. Vogel, who are you going to vote for?
Definitely one of the candidates.
Dr. Grove, who are you going to vote for?
I was considering voting for Queen Elizabeth II.
Dr. Toomey, who are you going to vote for?
I'm voting for yes for Rock and Roll Hall of Fame also.
Yes, I am.
Thank you all for being on the program. It's fascinating. We love politics. Very interesting, and a very interesting time that we live in. American Culture, Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences is this afternoon's program was produced by Gary Daniels. our student production assistant, John Hobbs, our program director, Clay Stanifer, our broadcast engineer, Don Berggraf, our executive producer, Tony Spinoza. Our theme music is White Horses, as performed by Tierra Negra and Muriel Anderson. American Culture, Arts, Humanities, Social Sciences at LMU will rebroadcast again this Saturday at 10 a.m., Sunday 8 p.m., and next Tuesday 7 a.m. This had been a WLMU radio broadcast, 91.3 FM LMU from Harrogate, Tennessee, the beautiful campus of Lincoln Memorial University. Thank you for listening.
Support for this program is made possible in part by Lincoln Memorial University in Harrogate, Tennessee. Further information on academics, campus life, educational programs, athletics, admissions, and financial aid, www.lmunet.edu.